So today's story actually starts with a person who, at least in their career trajectory, I have found to be a good role model or an inspiration. Now, this doesn't mean that as a person I necessarily approve of everything that's going on in this human being's life. Nobody's perfect. If you're looking for perfect, look somewhere else besides human beings. But who I'm talking about today is actually the Terminator, or Arnold Schwarzenegger. This is a pinball repair part from when I used to maintain a T2 arcade pinball machine back when I did pinball repair. But what I like about Arnold Schwarzenegger's path in life is that when he was 20 years old, he was Mr. Universe, literally world-class bodybuilder. And that's a point in his life when a lot of people could have checked that box and said, yeah, I did it. World-class status, great at something, among the world's leaders at something, in fact. And then that's where a lot of people from that point forward would just see him as a brute, a bodybuilder. And that's where a lot of people would begin to see themselves sort of typecast into that role. And that's the kind of thing that in game development all the time, we'll see someone who, early on, they're first a programmer, they stay a programmer for life. They were first doing art, they stay an artist for life. They only at first work on puzzle games and come to define themselves as, well, I guess I'm a puzzle game person. I don't get to do other things. And that's kind of absurd, right? And what's nice about the Arnold Schwarzenegger story is he went on after he was a bodybuilder, after he had checked that box. He was actually an entrepreneur, and a lot of people don't realize this part of his story because it's not quite as public. A part of every job is not being famous, right? But between being a bodybuilder, becoming a Hollywood action star, he was an entrepreneur and he ran a very successful, I believe it was a construction business. Might have been some sort of bricklaying, some sort of mail catalog business, but it was something that did quite well for himself. Again, as a private citizen, just running a business. I believe he was actually even a millionaire before he was a Hollywood action star, which is to say, separate from his bodybuilding career path, had decided that was something he'd made up his mind he was going to let himself do that. Didn't matter if other people expected it from him. Didn't matter if other people thought, well, a bodybuilder shouldn't be doing that. He did it. And then when he came over to Hollywood and famously, of course, became an action star, there were these early discussions in his career path. And these are stories I think I've seen interviews about and old articles about, where he'd have agents who would tell him, Arnold Schwarzenegger, no one can pronounce or spell your last name. You got to change that. Your accent, nobody can understand what the darn thing you're saying. We got to put you through all kinds of speech therapy to get rid of that accent so you can talk like a normal American. Your chin is just too something. Get that fixed. Let's get you into a plastic surgeon. And all these things that Arnold Schwarzenegger's response was, no, I'm going to find a way to make it work as me. I'm going to be who I am. I'm going to find what the role is to be who he wants to be, the way he wants to do it. And sure enough, he has created basically a new archetype, a new trope for an action hero, in a way that people after him will always be compared to the Arnold Schwarzenegger action hero star, in a way that, yeah, I mean, there were action movies before Arnold Schwarzenegger, but certainly not at the same caliber and the same style as he kind of helped become a center point of defining. And once again, there's a point where plenty of people would have put a checkbox and said, okay, I did it, right? Huge goal achieved, next level status, recognition, wealth, access, you name it, could have been done there. And lots of other people could have seen that and said, that's all, you know, he's ever going to be. He's a star for that sort of thing. And that was before he became governor for California, the state of California. And for people who aren't familiar with the numbers, California is actually like the 9th largest economy in the world. There's like 8 country GDPs bigger than California's, one of which is America's, so I'm not sure it counts. But things like Italy, France, I think Great Britain, maybe Germany, Japan, there's a short list of countries whose economies are larger than California's. It's like the 9th largest economy in the world. In fact, it's maybe 5 or 6 times the GDP and population of the country he was born in Austria. So to be born in a country, move to another place across the world where you don't speak the language, and then become a political leader there, pretty impressive. And it's also something where I realize, again, we don't necessarily agree with everything about his politics, and I certainly don't personally either, but as a person who he grew into that role and the maturity and the obligations of being a governor of the state of California, in a way that had a lot of support for 8 years, to a degree that maybe not everyone who's gone from showbiz to politics has maybe fared as well, and we'll maybe leave that discussion for another day. But that's something that even still, again, plenty of people could have said, okay, well, he did that, but even today, even to this day, right, even after that role has been completed, he still uses his platform, his status, and his reach to try to have positive messages out there, to support causes. He's still doing good things with it. And what I like about each one of these stages is that he didn't let strangers define or put him in a box of who he had been before. And this is something that throughout my career path, early on, I was basically a programmer. Then I became a level designer. And then I found my way into doing other types of game design. I became a small team producer. And each step of the way, somebody might have said, well, but you know, is that what you've done before? As though it's the only criteria. And the thing to realize, right, like, nobody has done anything until they do it for the first time, which is, like a lot of things, maybe simple to understand what's been pointed out. But until you do it, that's not what you do. But once you do, suddenly you're a person who does blank. And when I decided to want to become an educator, then I started teaching and found ways to do that, and found different outlets and ways to do that. And that's where I figured out that in some environments, say the university setting, it was going to be harder for me to teach the way I thought I should be teaching. And rather than mold myself to that environment to say, here's how learning happens in a university, here's the amount people get charged, here's the structure and the pattern and the process and the phase in their life we can reach and the geography that we can speak to, I said, I don't think that's the way I want to do it. I'm going to find a way to make it work my way. And just as another example for these, is beyond my own example and Schwarzenegger's, of course, I can't compare myself to him. We're at totally different apples and oranges and vastly different scales of operation. But another example that maybe works better because it's not so public as Arnold Schwarzenegger's is Tony Danza, who maybe you don't know the actor if you're a younger viewer, but he was a pretty famous actor on television. Tony Danza, you can look him up. And he's actually a case where, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, decided to not let anybody else put him in a box, to not let anybody else define that because he had acted on TV that that's all he'd ever get to be, and thought it was an important message. I believe he might get some of this inspiration from his dad, that he wanted to do other things. So he spent some time as a boxer. He actually did some time as a dancer. I think he did some time as a teacher to try it out, to add that to his life experience. He spent some time as an author a little bit, and all these different things which never were at the same level of public visibility as his acting. And again, it's actually not the job of every position to be famous. I think it's a useful thing to consider. But it's something that's another example of somebody who decided that they're going to live their life the way they want to, the way they feel right about, do the things that they want to do, because we kind of get that one shot for what we want to explore in it. And I encourage that as a way of thinking for game developers, because it's something that, again, sometimes what happens is we get some momentum early in our career. We figure out the kind of thing that we're doing, the kind of thing we first have a knack at, and begin to pigeonhole ourselves into those roles. We had actually a speaker today for the club, for Game Keto Club, Joe Fielder. He was to where he started, he was a reviewer for games. He was writing as an editor and as a writer for game reviews for magazines for many years. And he, later on in his career, was a writer for BioShock Infinite, which, what a cool game to be a writer on. And he had decided, even though he had done criticism and reviews, that's not what he wanted to do with his entire life path. And I think it's really great that within the space of game development, maybe to an even greater degree than so many other fields, there's so many adjacent kind of positions to slide into laterally that challenge us in different ways. All the time I've seen cases where, so actually as Joe mentioned his career path between being a game reviewer and game writer, in the middle he's actually a level designer. That was his way in. But all the time I see people go from programmer to designer in the game companies. I see people go from designer to business side or producer. And like I say, it's just a great thing that even with our club, right, we encourage people to shift between roles, try on different hats, find their identity, grow their identity, and to not lock themselves into, well, this isn't the one thing that I did. Or even, another version that's manifests itself as if somebody feels like, well, I went to school for this, so that's the only thing I ever get to do. And I think something to keep in mind from that is that there are so many things, not just in the game industry, but around the world, that there's A, either not schooling for, or B, they kind of actually don't care a whole lot if you have schooling in that specific thing. Now, there's jobs that still would like to see a college degree or some sort of advanced education because they're looking for that as a way of distilling who's a serious candidate or whatever. But oftentimes I've seen people with psychology degrees go on to work at giant business companies. I've seen people with physics degrees go into the game industry as programmers because ultimately they just need someone who can do the skill. And as long as you can learn up that skill, demonstrate you can know the skill, you can solve the problems that they have, they're interested. So just to say, to not feel like you had one choice, one chance, and for the rest of your life you got to live in that rut, you don't have to. And to a degree, of course, I'm of course speaking to some of the people in the comments who've been like, well, 4 times Chris did such and such kind of video. Why doesn't he do this all the time? And it's because I'm going to do my YouTube channel my way. Thanks to those of y'all out there who recognize that and support me in the comments. But that's it for the day. Actually, if you have a story of where you started off kind of on one lane and you were able to separate out from that track you were on and you pivoted, I'd be curious to hear in the comments as to what was the track you were on and what was the track you found, or what was the way you shifted across some sort of line where you didn't let other people's expectations about you limit that. You didn't let your own expectations about feeling like you had to live in that rut lock you in place. That's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. Chris Leon here. I'll have more videos for y'all coming up soon. Bye for now.